The skies above Eurasia had turned dark with smoke, and the once beautiful world lay in ruins. Buildings had crumbled into dust, forests were burned black, and rivers ran dry. The Gorlek Empire had attacked without warning, claiming the planet was helping rebels. Their warships had come from the stars and dropped fire from the sky. No one was safe. Many tried to flee, but not all made it. Some ships crashed during takeoff, others were shot down, and those who survived hid deep beneath the surface, hoping the Gorlaks would not find them. Among the survivors was Jerry, a young alien widow with skin like smooth lavender stone and eyes like warm suns. She had lost her husband in the first wave of attacks, and now she held her baby girl close to her chest, trying to protect her from hunger, cold, and fear. But the truth was painful. Jerry's milk had dried up days ago, and there was nothing left to feed the child. Her baby was weak, barely able to cry, her small breaths shallow. Jerry had nothing left, no food, no strength, only the desperate love of a mother who refused to give up. In a broken communications room, hidden inside the ruins of an old mining tower, Jerry found an ancient human beacon buried under rubble. It still flickered, barely working, but it was enough. She used it, her voice trembling and cracked, her body shaking from exhaustion. She didn't expect anyone to hear, but she tried anyway. Her message was short, filled with heartbreak. Please. My milk is gone. My child will die. Human, help us. Far above the smoking world, a single human scout ship floated. Among the stars, the ship, called the Reckoner, was small but fast-built for missions beyond known space. On board was Captain Jared Holt, a veteran of many wars. He had seen planets fall, seen friends die, and had lost his own daughter during a Gorlak raid on Earth's outer colonies. When the weak signal came through, he was in the middle of a patrol. His crew thought it was just another cry for help, one of many. But when Jared heard the message, something inside him changed. The voice was not shouting or begging for power, it was soft and broken. The sound of a mother asking the stars to save her child. Jared stood in silence for a moment after the message ended. Then he turned to his crew and said, "How close is the signal?" His second officer, Lt. Voss, scanned the system. "It's coming from the ruins of the Eurasia capital, 3 clicks inside the Gorlak bombing zone. Too hot for a full ship landing. We'll have to use a jump pod." Jared didn't hesitate. "Prep the pod. I'm going down." The crew looked at him, surprised. It was dangerous. Gorlak scouts were still active, and their ground forces were known to kill anything that moved, but no one stopped him. They knew their captain. They knew why he was doing this. Jared suited up in heavy armor, his pulse rifle locked to his chest, and entered the launch pod. As the countdown began, he looked once more at the image on his helmet, an old photo of his daughter, long gone, taken by war. The pod shot from the ship like a meteor, streaking through the clouds of ash toward the burning surface. Jared's eyes scanned the ground as he dropped, looking for the signal source, preparing for the fight he knew was coming. The pod crashed through layers of dust and metal, landing hard in the ruins. Jared kicked open the hatch, smoke swirling around him, the scent of fire and death filling the air. He moved fast, dodging rubble and flames, using his suit's heat sensors to track life signs. Gorlak scouts were nearby. He would have to move quickly. Every second mattered. He climbed over walls, ducked under twisted beams, and ran through broken streets, his heart pounding. The signal led him to a tall, half-collapsed tower covered in soot. Inside, he found her Jerry sitting against a wall, her body weak, arms wrapped tightly around a small, silent child. For a moment, she didn't see him. Then her eyes met his, and fear flashed across her face. Jared dropped his rifle. He raised both hands. "It's okay. he said softly, his voice calm through the helmet speakers. "I'm human. I'm here to help." Jerry stared at him, unsure if he was real or a dream. Her voice cracked as she held out the child. "Can you save her?" Jared stepped forward and gently touched the baby's hand. She was cold but alive. He opened a channel on his helmet. "Vus, this is Holt. I found them. We need a med. Shuttle Priority 1. Get them off this rock." But even as he spoke, his sensors picked up Gorlek troops moving in fast. The enemy had tracked his pod. They were coming. Jared picked up his rifle again and moved to the door. Behind him, Jerry clutched her baby and whispered something in her own language, a prayer, a hope, a plea. Jared looked at her and nodded. "You're not dying today," he said. Then he stepped into the fire to face what was coming. Captain Jared Holt stood firm in the ruins of the tower, the baby's weak breathing still fresh in his mind. The Gorlak forces were closing in fast, and his mission had turned from rescue into survival. He checked the armor's readout on his wrist, multiple heat signatures, fast movement all around him. The enemy wasn't sending scouts anymore. They were sending killers. Jared moved quickly, helping Jerry stand as she held her baby tight against her chest. Her steps were weak, and her eyes showed fear, but she didn't ask questions. She followed him as he guided her through broken doors and shattered halls, scanning for a safe path out. Outside, smoke filled the streets and distant blasts shook the air. Gorlak ships circled above like vultures, searching for signs of life. Jared ducked into cover beside a fallen wall and raised his rifle as the first Gorlak squad entered the street. They moved with heavy armor and glowing red eyes, weapons drawn, scanning the ruins for movement. He waited until the lead soldier passed by, then squeezed the trigger. The pulse rifle spat blue fire, striking the Gorlak in the chest and sending him crashing back. Chaos followed roars, shouting in their deep language, and returned fire lighting up the dust. Jared stayed low, calm and fast, firing short bursts, taking down one target after another. He had fought the Gorlaks before. He knew their weakness was overconfidence. While they charged, he moved sideways, flanking them through alleyways and broken tunnels. He didn't let them pin him down. As he fought, he kept checking on Jerry. She stayed hidden behind a support beam, crouched low, holding her child and shielding the baby with her own body. Her hands shook, but she didn't scream or run. She trusted him. More Gorlaks arrived, and Jared realized they were trying to trap him. He activated his helmet's beacon and called out, "Reckoner, this is Holt. Hostile contact confirmed. I've got the mother and child, but I need pickup now." The response came quick through the radio, the voice of LT Voss. "We're moving." "Into range, Captain. Dropship incoming." "Hold position for 30 seconds. Jared gritted his teeth. "Not going to be easy." He tossed a flash grenade and ran to Jerry, pulling her to her feet. "We move now," he said. She nodded, trusting him without hesitation. Together they ran through smoke and debris, dodging laser fire, climbing over rubble, Jared shooting behind them to cover their escape. The baby let out a soft whimper, the first sound since he had found her. That cry pushed Jared harder. She was still alive. She still had a chance. They reached an open street, and Jared looked up just in time to see the dropship descending. It hovered above the ground, side doors open, machine guns firing at the Gorlaks chasing them. The ship's engines roared as dust blasted outward in all directions. Jared lifted Jerry into the open door, and a crewman inside pulled her in. She curled into a corner, holding the child tightly. Jared jumped aboard next, yelling to the pilot, "Get us out of here." The dropship rose quickly, dodging incoming fire as it blasted skyward. A Gorlak missile locked on, but one of the escort fighters swooped in and shot it down. Inside the ship, Medics rushed to Jerry, scanning her and the baby. One gave the child a quick energy injection to stabilize her heartbeat. Jared removed his helmet and watched silently. The baby's skin was pale, her breath shallow, but she was alive. He looked at Jerry, and she looked back, tears running down her cheeks, though she didn't speak. There was no need. The expression on her face said everything: hope, relief, and something like trust. Jared sat against the wall, tired but alert, still gripping his rifle. He had fought to save a single mother and her baby, but he knew this rescue had sparked something bigger. The Gorlaks wouldn't ignore this. They would respond with more violence, more fear. But Jared didn't care. He had heard the cry of a mother, and he had answered. That was all that mattered. The baby's soft breathing steadied, and the ship turned toward the stars, heading back to the Reckoner, where better help and more danger waited. Jared closed his eyes briefly, his mind returning to memories of his own child, once lost. To war. Maybe this mission had saved more than just a life. Maybe it had saved a part of him, too. The dropship soared through the ash-filled skies as explosions echoed far below, the fires of war still burning on Urasha's broken surface. Inside, Captain Jared Holt stayed near Jerry and her baby, watching every breath the child took. Though still weak, the infant was alive, clinging to her mother's warmth. But Jared's armor systems flashed red warnings. Enemy forces were tracking them. Gorlak fighters had locked onto the dropship's trail. From the ship's side window, Jared could see them, sleek, dark vessels with blood-red lights cutting through the clouds like blades. The pilot swore as alarms screamed and twisted the controls to dodge incoming fire. The ship shook violently. Jerry clutched her baby tighter, her eyes wide with fear but her arms strong. Jared stood and braced himself as he grabbed the side. Rail, evasive pattern now, he shouted to the pilot. We have a mother and infant on board. No room for failure. The ship dove downward sharply, pulling G-forces through their bodies. Outside, the escort fighters returned fire, lighting up the sky with streaks of laser and plasma. One Gorlak ship exploded in a fireball, but more followed. The Reckoner was close, but they had to survive the next few minutes. Jared moved too. The dropship's rear door and activated the gun turret. He stood in the open, firing into the sky, shouting with every burst, his aim sharp and deadly. A Gorlak fighter veered too close, and he nailed it with a full salvo, sending it spiraling into the ruined city below. Another tried to flank them, but human gunners aboard the Reckoner locked on and blasted it to pieces. With a final roar of engines, the dropship broke through the chaos and reached the hangar bay. The doors opened and medical teams rushed forward as the ship landed. Jared helped Jerry out, shielding her with his armor as they moved quickly across the platform. Medics took the baby and placed her into a warming pod, connecting tiny tubes and monitoring her vitals. The ship's doctor, a calm woman named Dr. Yara Mendez, worked with quiet focus. She looked at Jared after scanning the baby. She's alive but starving. She needs nourishment. Now. Jerry sat beside the pod, her hands trembling. I cannot feed her. My body is empty. Her voice was full of pain. Jared looked at the doctor. We have formula, right? Mendez shook her head. Not for her species. Urashi biology is delicate. Nothing we have is compatible. Even water could harm the baby. We need a precise match or something new entirely. Jared's face went cold. Then make it. Mendez stared at him for a moment. Even if I try, it'll take time. Days. And she doesn't have days. Jared looked at the baby again, her tiny chest rising and falling. Her skin shimmered faintly under the medical lights. Life was still inside her, but fading. He turned to his comm officer. Send a signal across known space, priority distress. Tell them we have a Yurashi infant in critical condition. Request help from scientists, doctors, even alien researchers. Someone out there knows how to save this child." The officer hesitated. "Captain, Gorlek Command will intercept that message. They'll know we're sheltering a Yurashi." Jared didn't blink. "Let them come. Send the signal." The message went out, a powerful wave across systems. It carried the baby's image, Jerry's tearful face, and Jared's words. "This child is innocent. She needs milk, not war. If you have a heart, help us." As the signal traveled, responses began to return. From colonies, ships, research stations, and old allies. A Terran Yurashi hybrid scientist on Vega 9 promised to work through the night on a synthetic formula. A group of alien healers on Delta Fail said they would send samples. Even a few former enemies offered data on Yurashi biology. Jared stood at the front of the ship's briefing room, reading every reply, sending updates to the medbay. Hope was building, but time was still the enemy. Meanwhile, the Gorleks reacted with fury. Their high command sent a warning across all systems. Any ship aiding the Yurashi will be treated as an enemy of the Empire. But humanity did not back down. Other captains joined Jared's cause. Fleets moved into position. Soldiers readied themselves. What began as a single rescue was becoming something bigger. On the Reckoner, Jared returned to the medbay to find Jerry still beside her child, singing softly in her language. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Help is coming," he said. "Hold on just a little longer." She looked at him with quiet strength. "You fight for her? Like she is yours." Jared's voice was low. "Because every child deserves to live. And no parent should ever have to watch them fade alone." The war wasn't over, but something had changed. Across the stars, people were listening. A mother's cry had reached the hearts of many, and a human's courage had lit a fire that would not go out. The hum of machines filled the medbay as the infant lay inside a glowing pod, wrapped in warmth and monitored by careful human hands. Jared stood nearby, watching the quiet rise and fall of the baby's chest, knowing that every breath was borrowed time. Around him, his crew worked nonstop, doctors, scientists, engineers, all moving with one goal: to keep this child alive. They had received dozens of messages from across the stars, some from far-off research colonies, others from alien scientists who once fought against humans. Everyone wanted to help. But help was still hours away, and the baby needed milk now. Jerry sat close to the pod, her head resting on her folded arms, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Her voice was soft when she spoke, full of sorrow and fear. "I gave everything I had. My body is empty. I can feel her slipping from me." Jared knelt beside her and looked at the child. "You didn't fail her. You carried her through fire and death. You called for help, and I came, and I won't stop until she's safe." Jerry's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. She had no more strength to speak, but her expression said everything: gratitude, trust, and something else. A quiet hope that she had not felt in a long time. Dr. Mendez stepped in, holding a small vial. "We just received this from a hybrid lab on Vega 9. It's not natural milk, but it's been made from bioscans of the Yurashi body. We think it's safe." Jared took the vial with steady hands, then moved to the infant. The medical team cleared space for him. He gently fed a drop into the baby's mouth using a soft-tipped injector. Everyone watched. The baby didn't move at first, but then her mouth twitched. She swallowed. Another drop, then another. Her tiny hand curled slightly. Her chest rose deeper. A soft, almost silent sound came from her lips, a little gasp, like a new breath taken after drowning. Jerry covered her mouth and wept. Jared smiled for the first time in days. The baby wasn't just alive. She was fighting. Word spread fast across the ship. The child had responded. She had accepted the formula. And for the first time since the mission began, everyone aboard the Reckoner felt something powerful. Victory. Not the kind won with guns or ships, but the kind that came from saving a single innocent life in the middle of war. That night, messages poured in from every corner of human space. Civilians and soldiers alike sent support. Some offered more samples, others shared stories. One mother from Mars said, "I saw the video. I held my baby tighter. Please tell the alien mother we care." Another came from a ship of alien traders. "We once feared humans. Now we see you protect the helpless. We are sending supplies." But not all messages were kind. The Galactic Empire sent a warning to the Terran Council. They called the rescue an act of defiance, and they labeled Jared and his crew as enemies of the Empire. They demanded the child be turned over, saying the Urashi were a broken race, a danger to the galaxy. Humanity's answer was clear. The Terran Council broadcasted a reply: "This child will be protected. We do not surrender babies. If you want to take her, come and face us." Fleet Command ordered more ships to the region. Defense lines were strengthened. Fighters patrolled the skies around the Reckoner. Jared stood on the bridge staring out into the stars. He wasn't just a captain now. He was the face of something bigger. His choice to answer that message, to step into fire for one mother and her child, had awakened something in people. A memory of why they fought, why they stood up against cruelty. That night, Jerry joined Jared on the observation deck, her baby in her arms, now sleeping quietly with full cheeks and warm skin. The stars stretched across the black void like silver rivers. "Her name is still unspoken," Jerry said. "In my culture, we name our children when they survive their first storm. She has survived fire, hunger, and silence." Jared looked at her. "She deserves a name filled with meaning." Jerry smiled softly. "She does." As they stood in silence, alarms rang through the ship. Enemy movement. Galactic ships had crossed into the sector. A fleet, angry, armed, and heading straight for them. Jared's voice hardened. "Get the crew ready. Lock all systems. We hold the line here." The mother and child had been saved once, but the battle for their future was only just beginning. Across the stars, the cry of the alien mother and the bravery of one human captain had spread like fire in the wind. The message Jared sent, the image of Jerry holding her weak baby and the human feeding her with trembling hands, touched hearts. Across many worlds, on planets far from the war, people gathered around screens, watching the footage again and again. They saw not a war between races, but a fight to save a child. They saw a story that felt simple and pure. It wasn't about politics or territory, it was about love. Help poured in from everywhere. Scientists on Vega 9, inspired by the child's survival, worked without rest to perfect the formula. They sent better versions, stronger and safer. On Delta Fail, a peaceful alien world, old enemies of humans offered rare healing plants to help the infant grow strong. Even ships from neutral systems, ones who usually stayed away from conflict, sent supplies, food, medical units, and messages of support. Jared watched it all from the Reckoner's bridge. He had only meant to answer a simple call for help, but now he was leading something far bigger. And yet, as hope grew, so did danger. The Galactic Empire burned with rage. Their leaders called Jared's act a crime and declared any who helped the Urashi child as traitors to galactic order. They said the child was the symbol of rebellion and would bring unrest, but no one listened to them. Instead, other captains, touched by Jared's bravery, joined his mission. Small ships at first, then full squadrons, then carriers. A fleet. Volunteers and allies began to form, their flags flying proudly beside Earth's. The Reckoner became more than a scout ship. It became the heart of a growing resistance, not one of war alone, but of protection, of choosing to stand between evil and the innocent. Jared kept the baby's pod under full watch. Jerry stayed by her side, singing to her in quiet tones, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying. The child had started to move more, stretch her tiny arms, and grip Jerry's finger. Her skin was warmer. Now, her breath stronger. Life was blooming inside her. Still, Jared knew it would take only one attack to undo everything. The Gorlaks had power-huge fleets, deadly weapons, no mercy. So he prepared. He trained his crew, checked every weapon system, reinforced shields, and kept his allies ready for the call to fight. Late one night cycle, Jared sat beside Jerry in the med bay. He watched the baby sleep, her small body rising and falling gently. "What will you name her?" he asked. Jerry looked down, her voice soft. "In my language, we name a child after what they bring into the world." Jared nodded. "And what has she brought?" Jerry turned her eyes to him. "Hope." Jared felt something tighten in his chest. "That's a perfect name." Messages came in that very hour, news from scouts. Gorlak ships had started blocking medical trade routes. They were searching ships, demanding to know if anyone had helped the Reckoner or the Urachi baby. Some smaller supply vessels were shot down without warning. The message was clear. The Gorlaks wanted to erase this child, erase the memory of her survival. But it was too late. She had already become more than a baby. She had become a symbol. Not just for the Urashi, but for every race that had ever been crushed under the Gorlak boot. Jared met with his allied commanders. "They're trying to scare us," he said. "Trying to break the chain of help. But we won't break. We'll protect every ship, every person who stood up for this child. If they want to silence us, they'll have to go through us." His words were met with nods, cheers, fists raised high. They were no longer just defending a ship or a baby. They were fighting for something pure, something right. Across the galaxy, new banners were raised, ones with no symbol of empire, no sign of conquest. Just a simple image, a human hand holding a small alien child. That image spread like light in the dark, and it carried one word beneath it, hope, and on board the Reckoner, the child named Hope began to laugh for the first time. A soft, pure sound. Jerry laughed too, holding her close, and Jared stood quietly nearby, his heart heavier but stronger. He didn't know what the next battle would bring, but he knew why he would fight it. For her, for them, for all those still crying out for help across the stars. The sky above Urasha's orbit glowed with the fire of approaching war as Jared stood at the front of the Reckoner's command bridge, watching dozens of enemy signals move into position. The Gorlak Empire had sent their answer, not words, but weapons. Warships, carriers, and dreadnoughts slipped through the dark like monsters from deep water, ready to crush the growing fleet that had formed around Jared's ship. But humanity didn't stand alone. Around the Reckoner, other ships moved into place, Earth battleships, Martian cruisers, and even alien vessels flying old flags of neutrality. The baby named Hope had awakened something across the stars, and those who had once remained silent now stood ready to fight for her. Jared looked at the faces of his crew. Some were tired, others tense, but all were focused. They weren't just defending a ship or a cause, they were protecting a single child who had become the light in a galaxy full of shadows. On the lower deck, Jerry cradled Hope in her arms, humming softly as she rocked her. The baby blinked up at her, her golden eyes curious and alert. Hope had survived starvation, fear, and silence. Now she was full of warmth and movement. Jerry kissed her forehead and whispered, "You've changed the stars, my little one." You gave the galaxy something to believe in again. An alarm echoed. Through the reckoner, Jared turned to his officers. The Gorlaks are in firing range, LT, Voss said. They're not bluffing. Jared nodded. Then we won't either. He activated the ship-wide comms. This is Captain Holt. You all know why we're here. You know what's at stake. We don't fight because we want war. We fight because no empire gets to decide who lives and who dies. That baby in the medbay, she's not just one child. She's a promise. A reminder that every life matters. Today, we don't just hold the line. We show the Gorlaks what it means to stand for something real. Cheers broke out across the fleet. Weapons powered up, shields raised. The Gorlaks opened fire first. Their beams struck hard, bright as lightning, but the Allied ships held strong. The Reckoner spun through space, its cannons roaring, missiles streaking through the dark. Fighters launched from carriers, dodging and diving through enemy flak. Jared moved like a storm, shouting orders, calling out weak points, tracking threats with calm fury. A Gorlak cruiser tried to flank them, but a Martian destroyer cut across and rammed it from the side, sacrificing itself to protect the fleet. Inside the Reckoner, damage teams raced through smoke-filled halls, patching wires and sealing breaches. Still, the ship stayed in the fight. On the medical floor, Jerry held Hope close as the room shook from blasts. "It's okay," she whispered. "You are not alone. They're fighting for you. All of them." Above, Jared spotted the Gorlak command ship, a massive vessel bristling with firepower, moving slowly into position to strike a killing blow. If it fired its main cannon, half the fleet could be wiped out. "Target their power core," Jared ordered. "Get me a clear path." Fighters flew ahead, drawing fire. The Reckoner dived under enemy formations, its engines burning hot, dodging blasts by inches. Jared guided the ship with perfect timing until they were lined up with the enemy command ship. "Fire all railguns." The cannons on the Reckoner lit up and slammed into the Gorlak ship's hull. Explosions ripped across its body as systems failed. A second volley struck deep and then silence. The Gorlak flagship split in two and drifted away, burning. The enemy fleet paused. Their strength was broken. One by one, Gorlak ships began retreating, turning and disappearing into the stars. Cheers roared through the Allied fleet. The sky was theirs. The battle was over. Jared stood on the bridge, breathing hard. Around him, the crew celebrated. But his mind was already elsewhere. He ran to the medbay, where Jerry looked up with tears in her eyes. "You won," she said. Jared shook his head. "No, she did." He looked at the baby now peacefully asleep in her mother's arms. The child they had saved, the one who had united ships, worlds, and hearts. That day, the galaxy saw more than the end of a battle. They saw the rise of something stronger than war, a shared belief that hope, even in the smallest form, could bring light to the darkest places. The celebration across the fleet was short-lived as a new threat appeared, something far worse than the regular Gorlak warships. The Gorlak Empire, humiliated by their defeat, had called in their last weapon, the Dreadhammer, a massive supership, the size of a city, known for its ability to destroy entire planets. It moved slowly into Urasha's orbit like a dark moon, blocking the stars with its shadow. It carried enough firepower to level the surface and erase all life below, and its purpose was clear: finish what the first attack had failed to do. On the Reckoner, alarms rang again. Jared stood at the window and stared at the massive machine of death. Around him, crew members worked quickly, scanning the enemy ship and running simulations. But none of the data looked good. The Dreadhammer was nearly unstoppable. Its outer armor was thick and its core was buried deep within, protected by layers of shields and guns. No ordinary attack would bring it down. "We can't take that thing in a straight fight," LT Voss said. "We'd be dust before we even got close." Jared didn't answer right away. He looked at the planet below, then at the medbay feed, showing Jerry cradling hope. Then he turned back to his team with calm eyes. "Then we don't fight it the usual way. We go inside it." The plan was dangerous, maybe even suicidal, but it was the only chance. A small strike team would infiltrate the Dreadhammer through one of its hidden maintenance tunnels. Once inside, they would plant explosives near the core and trigger a chain reaction. If it worked, the entire ship would explode from within. If it failed, the last hope of Eurasia would be lost. Jared led the team himself. Alongside him were 6 volunteers, engineers, soldiers, and 1 alien pilot who had once escaped from the Gorlax. They flew a stolen Gorlax scout ship to avoid detection and slipped past the outer guns. Once inside, they moved through the metal halls of the beast, keeping to the shadows. The inside of the Dreadhammer was like a living nightmare machines. Hummed with power, walls pulsed with heat, and the air stank of oil and death. Jared's team moved carefully, dodging patrols, disabling cameras, and planting explosives near the main reactors. Every second felt longer than the last. They had to finish before the Dreadhammer reached firing range. Back on the Reckoner, the crew held their breath. Jerry sat in silence, watching the screen, her hand resting on her child's head. She didn't understand every word spoken, but she understood enough. Jared had gone into the jaws of the beast to protect them. Inside the supership, things went wrong. The last reactor was deeper than expected, and guards found their trail. Alarms sounded. Jared and his team fought hard in tight hallways, gunfire echoing, sparks flying, one engineer falling while shielding the explosives. Still, they pushed forward. Jared planted the final device and set the countdown. "Time to leave," he said, but enemy troops blocked the way back. There was no escape. One of the engineers, a young woman named Wren, looked at the team and sighed. "Go. I'll stay and hold them off." Jared shook his head. "You'll die," Wren smiled sadly. "Maybe, but that baby gets to live. That's worth it." She stayed behind, covering their retreat with fire and courage. Jared and the others sprinted through alternate paths, chased by explosions and collapsing walls. With only minutes left, they reached the scout ship, launched it into space, and watched from a distance as the Dreadhammer began to break apart. First, small lights flickered across its body. Then came the roar of a growing fireball from deep within. The ship cracked in half, then tore into pieces, burning as it fell. The sound reached across the stars, even through the silence of space, like the final breath of a dying monster. On the Reckoner, cheers broke out, but not wild ones, quiet, emotional ones. People hugged, cried, and looked to the sky with new hope. Jared's voice came over the comms. "Target destroyed. Coming home." As the strike ship returned, Jerry stood at the airlock with hope in her arms. Jared stepped out, armor scorched, face tired but smiling. The crew clapped and patted his shoulders, but he walked straight to the mother and child. "She's safe," he whispered. "You're safe." Jerry touched his hand and placed her daughter into his arms. Hope looked up at him with bright eyes, reaching out with her small fingers. And for a moment, nothing else mattered. Not the war, not the blood, not the pain, just the miracle of one life saved by so many. That day, the galaxy didn't just see the fall of a mighty warship. They saw what it meant to fight not for power, but for something pure. They saw that sometimes the strongest weapon was not a gun or a fleet, but the will to protect a child no matter the cost. The battle was over, and the sky was quiet again. The wreckage of the Dreadhammer still floated in space, a broken giant that once brought fear to entire systems, now nothing more than a burning memory. On board the Reckoner, the mood had changed. People walked the halls with softer steps and clearer eyes. The crew had seen death, yes, but they had also seen something greater, a child's life saved, a galaxy moved, and unity formed not by treaties or fear, but by love and courage. Jared sat on the medical deck beside Jerry, both of them watching Little Hope sleep in a small crib made from parts of the old medpod. She looked stronger now, her breathing calm, her fingers curled gently as she dreamed. Her skin had gained color, and her eyes, when they opened, sparkled with awareness. She had survived war, hunger, and fireproof that even in a broken galaxy, something pure could still grow. Jerry reached over and gently brushed her baby's cheek. "She will remember none of this," she whispered, "but the stars will." Jared nodded. "And so will we." Across the systems, the story of hope had spread farther than any fleet could fly. On Earth, people gathered in streets to watch news of the battle. They cheered not for destruction, but for what it meant, that sometimes the smallest voice could move armies. On alien worlds once afraid of humans, leaders now called for peace talks and alliance. Former enemies began to send envoys, carrying offers not of war, but of friendship. Hope had become more than a baby. She had become a symbol for something no empire could crush. Messages flooded the Reckoner. From a mining colony near Saturn, we named our newborn after her. From a war refugee ship drifting in Sector 9, for the first time, we believe again. And from a lone Gorlak soldier, one who had deserted the battlefield, I could not shoot at the ship that carried her. I am sorry. I want to help now. Jared read each message and sent replies, sometimes with tears in his eyes. He never expected this. He had only wanted to answer a cry for help, but that one act had lit a fire across the stars. Yet he also knew the war was not finished. The Gorlak Empire still had power, still ruled many systems with fear. But now the galaxy had a reason to resist. They had seen what one human could do when he chose to protect rather than destroy. They had seen what courage looked like. And it had begun with the smallest of lives. Days passed and the fleet stayed in orbit, repairing ships, burying the fallen, and helping survivors on Eurasha. Jared helped lead the efforts. He spoke with commanders and engineers, but he always found time to visit Jerry and Hope. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a blanket made by the ship's cook, a soft light orb that made Hope giggle, or just his time, sitting quietly beside them. One day, Jerry asked him, "Why did you come? When you heard my voice, why did you answer?" Jared looked down at the child in her arms. "Because once, I couldn't save my daughter. She was caught in a Gorlak raid on one of our colonies. I was too late. When I heard your voice, I heard her in it. I couldn't fail again." Jerry touched his hand gently. "You didn't fail. You saved mine." A ceremony was held on the Reckoner's main deck. Not a military one, but something softer. Jared stood before his crew and the gathered captains of allied ships. With Jerry beside him and Hope in her arms, he spoke simply. This child reminded us who we are. She reminded us that strength is not only in our weapons, but in our hearts. She brought unity, not by force, but by need. And we answered, may we never forget what brought us together. Then Jerry stepped forward. In front of all, she lifted her child and spoke her daughter's name for the first time in public. Her name is Hope, because she gave it to us. The crowd stood in silence for a moment. Then the applause rose not loud or wild, but full of feeling. In that quiet, steady sound, the galaxy made a promise to itself, that they would remember, protect, and build a future worthy of that name. Hope became a symbol not only for peace but for strength, for standing up when no one else would, for answering when others turned away, and for fighting not to destroy but to save. Jared watched the stars later that night, thinking of what was ahead. The war wasn't over. The fight for justice would go on, but now there was a reason, a name, a child who had survived against all odds. And in her small hands she carried the future of 1,000 worlds.